Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Raiden, the 1990 arcade classic that launched a series. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Saibu Kaihatsu, Raiden originally released to arcades in 1990. It would see ports to several systems afterwards, including notably an MS-DOS port, the Atari Jaguar and the Atari Lynx, and the Super Nintendo. So fast forward to today, and we have this version of it, the Arcade Archive release courtesy of Hamster, available on the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. Now, despite all those ports, Raiden is not actually a title that I have actually played. So this is really my first experience with it, and it's not really my favorite title. This isn't the kind of shoot 'em up that I'm in the mood for at this time, but for a lot of people it could be one that's quite enjoyable. So the game itself does have quite a brutal difficulty, and that's like not really what I'm in the mood for, but that's my opinion. Let's have a look at the game itself and you can decide whether or not this is something you're interested in picking up for yourself. So putting credits into the machine, we're just taken to this screen here, and it's possible to play the game 1 or 2 player. In addition to that, the Arcade Archive release does come with both the Japanese ROM and the international ROM, and I highly encourage you to play the international one, as the Japanese uses a checkpoint system, whereas in the international one you'll just spawn where you die. So that is preferable in my mind. So the game itself is a fairly straightforward vertical scrolling shoot 'em ups. You have one weapon by default. You start with the Vulcan or the Wide. It can be referred to as both ways depending on the research you look into it. And then there's also the laser. So you can see the red ship is currently equipped with the Wide. It doesn't actually start to become a wide shot until you power it up to level 3, and the weapons can go all the way up to level 8, so that is something to keep in mind. And the laser starts at level 1 and goes up to level 8 as well, but that one doesn't cover as much space, it just gets wider, but it does deal a fair bit of damage. In addition to that, you also have additional bombs that we can pick up, and we'll show off the bombs here in just a moment. And there are also missiles. There are 2 types of missiles. The M is just a straight fire missile that deals a fair bit of damage. H is a homing missile that's significantly weaker, but definitely has its uses. There are also a couple different point power-ups that you can obtain throughout the course of the game that are, well, you might have actually seen them in other Raiden titles. There's one enemy called Mikulus that comes from a 1985 title of Saibu called Wiz, and then there's also the Fairy, which will also give you power-ups when you die. There's one other power-up that I haven't mentioned as well. Sometimes you'll come across a P power-up, which is very useful as it will power up your shot and your missiles all the way to full. So the game uses a dynamic difficulty system, often referred to as the rank, and it's a ranking system. And one thing that's interesting in the instruction manual, even, I guess maybe they're acknowledging that the game has a fair bit of difficulty to it, but in the manual for that the Hamster provides with the game, they actually provide, so there's the bomb. It's a little bit delayed in the firing, so you do have to be careful, as using it to clear shots is going to be a difficult proposition. But it does deal a fair bit of damage and clears enemy shots at the time that you use it. Anyway, there are hints in the manual to how to maintain an easier rank, including using the second ship rather than the first player ship that has an easier rank. And then it also has an interesting tidbit about the timing of credits. I'm not 100% sure how that plays into account, but it says to experiment with when you enter credits into the machine for changing the rank. In addition to that, there's also some other information that's available online as well that says picking up the laser and the M missile will increase rank faster than picking up the wide and the homing missile. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking. Oh, there's that like Miculus character that I was like talking about. It's just worth points, but it's still cute to see. So if you're looking to kind of like control the difficulty settings of the game itself, that's some way to do so. So here's that P power-up I told you that brings you up to full power, so we can see the wide in all of its glory. So the game itself runs across a total of 8 stages, and then after that the gameplay just loops. So it came across. This title came about as Saibu was like dealing with the disappointing sales of their previous title. They were looking to develop something that was popular at the time, and vertical scrolling shoot 'em up definitely was in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was fairly easy to develop. And they were able to use cheaper arcade boards, making it for one that sold really quite well and was able to make the company a fair bit of money. I believe it sold 17,000 arcade boards, which is like really good. Add on to that all the ports, and you would see several titles that would come after this one. So Raiden 2, then there was the Fighter series that would come after this, and eventually Saibu Kaihatsu would go out of business, and the developers of the Raiden series would ultimately join Moss and go on to develop Raiden 3, Raiden 4, Raiden 5, as well as some other great shoot 'em ups like Caladrius, let's see, as an example. So the series definitely has a lot of history to it, and it's really nice to actually be able to play the original. As I mentioned, there's sometimes this just isn't the kind of shoot 'em up that I'm in the mood to play, but I can see where this one would be a really appealing shoot 'em up for those that are looking to challenge a game and get better at it. So the difficulty does start to really spike after the first couple stages. So expect this one to eat a lot of your credits as you're getting used to the game and the system. In addition to that, I do recommend playing this game like a 2-player. Not only does it make it easier with the brutal difficulty, but there's some interesting systems involving 2-player as well. So if you set something like this up where you've got one player shooting the other, you'll actually get some sparks off of the second player's shot hitting the first player. Or if you're combining weapons together right on top of each other, you'll kind of get the same kind of experience, and just need to see those extra little bonuses added into some shoot 'em up. So one thing that's kind of interesting about the bosses, sometimes they can be a little bit unfair and brutal, as we haven't learned their patterns all that well. But after they're defeated, the stage goes on for a time before it actually gives you the clear stage, and it's like, are we done yet? And yeah, finally we are. Just an interesting little tidbit there. So there you have it. Raiden served up for your enjoyment. As far as the minus flavors are concerned, my biggest problem, as you might have noticed, there is a scrolling screen left and right, and my biggest issue with the game itself is that can set up for there being a lot of basically sneak or surprise attacks, where you'll scroll an enemy onto the screen and that enemy will shoot you before you're really even aware that they're there. Not necessarily my favorite system to deal with. So, and that's just the basic thing. It's just that it just feels like the game itself is kind of set up to be unfair to the player in a lot of the stages and the scenarios. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, I do like the stage variety. For the time, we have a lot of interesting background and well, just environments that we're dealing with. So it ranges from fighting over a jungle ultimately to fighting in space, as we're fighting an alien life form that's taken over the military power of Earth, and having to fight back against that foe. And then there's also just like the series, like seeing this the beginning of a popular series, as I do quite enjoy Raiden 4, and Raiden 5 was an interesting title to experience as well. So, especially if you're looking for a difficult shoot 'em up to challenge yourself with, then this is one that I think would be an excellent one to pick up. It is nice and enjoyable as an arcade archive title, and it's nice to see a couple different versions here with the Japanese ROM as well as the international, though I do, once again, would recommend the international one over the original Japanese. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.